So I'm speaking here with Rob Ross, Chief Program Officer of Juilliard Tianjin. So, Rob, first of all, I guess I'm curious to ask you some questions just about yourself and your history in education. I understand you've been with Juilliard for over 20 years. You were working with Juilliard for about 20 years before coming to Tianjin.
For myself, I started as a drum set drummer. That's my background. And my dad was a jazz drummer, so I grew up with that. He and my sister loved Broadway show tunes, so I love that too. Um, rock drumming. I'm a kid of the 90s, or I was a teenager in the 90s, so I love all alternative rock and grunge and Pearl Jam and Nirvana and all that stuff. I was a marching band guy, so I really love drum lines and that kind of thing, big band, you know, jazz. So classical for me was much later. Also, sorry, I forgot one major artist who influenced me from age 8, and that's Michael Jackson. I'm a huge Michael Jackson fan. So I think all of that stuff really just made me who I am. And then when classical music came into my life, really in late high school and into college, that was just yet another genre that interested me. I was never going to become like principal timpani of the New York Philharmonic. I knew that, but I also knew that the impact and importance music had on my life and my upbringing. It was my social network. It was my way of becoming part of a team because I'm okay at sports, but I was never going to be, starting shortstop of my baseball team. So music was my way of doing all those things, and I knew that since I had a talent for organization and administration, I knew that that was going to be my path to making sure that music was part of everyone's life, or the experience I had can be passed along to students maybe similar to me in the future. So that's my personal path with music. But as far as Juilliard, I'd love to see Tianjin Juilliard expand more into different genres. I'm not sure it's in the cards yet. I think we still have to establish our core function here, similar to New York Juilliard. I mean, they were strictly classical for a long time, and it took them a long time to establish the jazz program. It took them a long time to establish the opera program or the historical performance program. Even new music, which had always been a part of Juilliard, really took on a different level of importance maybe in the past like 20 or 30 years, I would say. So if anything is going to happen at Tianjin Juilliard, I would think it's going to be something like the contemporary music scene, right? Preparing our students to play works by composers who've been alive only in the past 30, 40, 50 years. And there's a lot of good stuff being written right now in Asia, in China, in America, all over the world. So I think uh, having the let's start with the foundation. I mean, you need a really solid music theory background. You have to understand what's happening fundamentally in the music. You have to be able to play it technically, practice those scales because those scales will enable you to have that dexterity to play anything in any key at any time. And then you put those things together and you add in some new interesting, some composer with a new viewpoint on music, and that's what we need. That happens after we establish our basic program. Introducing something like jazz, it's a bit of a diversion. You need a completely different set of faculty. You need a completely different set of students. Same thing with historical performance. You need completely different instruments to establish something where you study music from like the 1500s, 1600s on those period instruments. So I think that might be later on,
Mhm.
but new music with extended techniques, that's what I see. I'd love to be focusing on here over the next few years.
Yeah, and that makes sense to me based on helping everybody to understand what it is that you're offering. I wonder if maybe we could start though with Juilliard. I understand that Juilliard in New York was founded 1905. It was the Institute of Musical Art, founded by Frank Damrosch in New York. In 1919, Augustus Juilliard donated towards the school, and the Juilliard Musical Foundation was created.
That sounds right. And the interesting thing, Augustus Juilliard was a textile merchant, right? So he wasn't a musician. I think he probably loved music, which is why he donated, I think, $10 million to the school. Back in 1919, $10 million is a heck of a lot of money. But to name something in perpetuity for $10 million these days, that's not heard of, right? These days, I think people give $5 million to name something for about 20 years, and then the process starts again. But yeah, I think Juilliard, he donated that money, and ever since then, it was basically referred to the Juilliard School.
Wow. I mean, you're right. I will say that 1919, 10 million would have probably been the equivalent today of about 10 times that, right?
Yeah,
That's a lot of money. It wasn't until 1926 that actually those two things formally merged and it became the Juilliard School, right?
that's right. Yeah. And also, they created the first pre-college division, the first part of the Juilliard School available to anyone younger than college age. In 2019, that's when we celebrated the 100th anniversary of the pre-college in New York.
I remember all of my experiences at pre-college very fondly. They were challenging, but they were so fulfilling.
The Juilliard Pre-College started as the Juilliard Prep Division. Over the last decade or two, the range of the education has increased considerably, all within the confines of a Saturday, which we cannot increase beyond 24 hours.
As we look back and celebrate 100 years, we also look forward. We look to it with hope that we can share the experience of pre-college with as many young, talented students as possible. From all backgrounds, from all interest levels, we have the platform for success in the future, as musicians certainly, but also as human beings.
One of the questions that is just burning in my brain is it's been around, so we're talking about at least 100 years, right? And for the first time ever, Juilliard has opened another campus outside of New York. Why Tianjin? What would you say? What would be I mean, I'm sure that's a very complex answer, but if you simplify it, how would you answer that?
It's a complex answer to one of the most frequently asked questions we get, right? And it's not even why China, because I think a lot of people understand why primarily a classical music school goes to China these days. But why Tianjin? Well, I guess if we pull back the camera and rewind things a little bit, we can start to see over the first 120 years or so of the school, there were only, I think, 7 presidents of the institution. And the most recent president before the current one is a man named Joseph Polisi. And he was president of the Juilliard School for around 34 years. And so when you do the math, that's almost a quarter of its existence was under the direction of this one person. And his legacy, he knew his time was going to end at some point as president. And I think what he wanted to make sure for the Juilliard School is that there was a future in classical music, that there was, even though we saw the downward trend in the United States for many years of people being interested in classical music, people studying music at that level for even from the youngest ages, but certainly through the professional levels, and audiences, which is a big topic we talk about in the States. Audiences are getting older for classical music, and he wanted to ensure that there was always this sort of influx of interest, of young talent. And even though the Juilliard School recruits about a third of its students from overseas, he wanted to make sure that there was always this funnel, this channel, and again, this generated interest. So I think maybe about 10 years before he finished his presidency, he started exploring how can we expand the footprint of Juilliard? How can we make an impact that really is worldwide and not just in this little section of 65th Street and Broadway in Manhattan, New York City? And so he started a few initiatives to figure this out, a lot of market research and a lot of worldwide travel to look at where the locations of a branch campus could possibly exist. I think China was very much on his mind this whole time, but he did look at several other countries, a lot of them in the Asia region, but China was always at the top of the list. Within China, it became, I don't want to say it was a bidding war because I don't know that that's true, but I do think they looked at various cities across China and again, the impact that the Juilliard School could have in each of those cities. Something important to remember about this project now is that we are a joint venture. So we are not here as a commercial enterprise. We are here as a nonprofit school who, by law here, must have a partner on the ground. So we started looking at different institutions. Well, let's say we want to go to Shanghai. Who could we partner with there? The Shanghai Conservatory. If we want to go to Beijing, well, we can partner with the Central Conservatory in Beijing or the China Conservatory in Beijing. These are all very reputable schools who may or may not benefit from a partnership with the Juilliard School in New York. Well, I'm sure there's benefits, but they may not be in such high need to partner with a school like ours. In Tianjin, there's two major factors that are in play. First, the joint venture partner. And the Tianjin Conservatory here, which has been around for a very long time, we felt and they felt that a partnership would actually benefit both institutions. And so from the very beginning, they were very much on board with the idea of having us be another powerful school within their own city. But secondly, this operation isn't cheap, right? You were at our school a couple of weeks ago and you saw the wonderful building that has been built. You see the location on the river. You see a lot of things that require infrastructure and a lot of support, both from our government partners and other financial partners. And those partners existed in a very strong way within Tianjin. So I think the alignment of those two major factors, and I am kind of simplifying this a little bit, but the alignment of a joint venture partner who can benefit from us, who wants us here, and the partnership and support by the government here, as well as financial investors, that kind of made it a no-brainer that this is the location that is best for this one and only branch campus.
Wow. So you said something there that took me off guard, is that other schools might not consider that this would be a benefit for them, which honestly, I mean, part of it is that I'm going from the perspective of somebody who's been to the location, been to the campus. I've seen it. I've seen the students and the faculty in operation. So it's a different perspective, I suppose, but it never occurred to me that anyone would say, no, thanks. We don't want a Juilliard. We don't want the only other Juilliard outside of New York in our city. Like, wow. I mean, of course, we're talking about absolutely massive, highly successful programs in schools. Yeah, I get what you're saying. It just had never occurred to me, because
Right.
I think, I don't know, maybe it's just my own perspective, but Juilliard, when you hear that name, it carries with it so much weight that I imagined there would be a huge bidding war for people just like really wanting to be the ones that would have that location.
I could make an analogy to you or your listeners who happen to be baseball fans. Let me use basketball as an example.
Okay.
If I'm LeBron James and someone said to me, okay, do you want Steph Curry to come to your team? I mean, maybe in some ways that would be a wonderful partnership, but in other ways, that's a lot of ego. That's a lot of other things to balance. And I think, I'm not saying that that's the only reason, but when you have some of these powerful conservatories within China who have been extremely successful in what they do, and they invite another big name who hasn't had a presence yet in China, I think that was probably part of the consideration. And the Tianjin Conservatory, like I said, it's had success. It's been around for a very long time, but it may not have been the conservatory that you associate with the Shanghai conservatories or the central conservatories. And I think they felt that they could benefit a lot from us being here, from our teachers working with their students, from just even from a teacher training pedagogical expansion point of view. I think they saw that there were a lot of benefits to them.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I do think, when whatever sport, if you're looking at the top player in that sport, one of the things is, can your city even afford to bring them in? I mean, a city has to seriously consider, can they bring in enough ticket sales to actually furnish that, right? To allow that.
That's
So
right.
yeah, that does make sense what you're saying. I'm not sure how this fits in what we're talking about right now, but it's all part of the same big picture. I guess what the reason it occurs to me right now is because I was just surprised by what you said. And I was also surprised when you were talking with all the teachers, myself and the other ACAMIS people who were there. For those people viewing right now, ACAMIS is the Association for China and Mongolia International Schools. And Rob and all of the people at Juilliard Tianjin were kind enough to welcome us in. We had an arts educators conference with ACAMIS, and you guys welcomed us in for the pre-conference where we did workshops and we did a tour. It was just an amazing day. So thank you for that, first of all. That was
It
awesome.
was fun, a lot of fun to put together. Yeah.
As you were talking to the teachers there, you were talking about things that surprised me a little. I always think of Juilliard as the place where if you've studied for enough years, enough hours, and you've reached that point where you can audition and get into the school, basically the elite, the best of the best. And Juilliard is not just that, especially in Juilliard Tianjin, what you were telling us, the summer program that, I'm looking at whether or not my son could go to that. He's been playing the violin for a couple of years, and I do think he's good on the violin. But honestly, before hearing you talk, I hadn't considered the possibility of sending him to Juilliard at this point in his development, Summer program, all of the outreach programs that you're doing. You guys do outdoor concerts for people regularly. I think I read something like 150 concerts a year, something like that.
Yeah.
So I wonder if you can just talk a little bit about that. How was that process? Was that just built into the decision to go to Tianjin? Okay, when we go, we're also going to do these programs, and that's just going to be part of what we do. Or did that develop over time as the conversation advanced?
I think, again, pulling the camera back a little bit, and when we look at the conservatories across the world, especially the ones in the United States, I think we see this picture kind of like what I was saying before. We want the most talented people to fulfill the spots in the college division or in the master's degree or in the doctoral programs. We want those professional level people. And for many generations, there have been a flow of people who are ready to audition at that high level because the stages before that, right? And we're looking at public schools generally in the United States. They had thriving arts programs. And every school you went to had 3 choruses and 2 large ensembles, an orchestra and a wind band. They did musicals. They did all these different things. They provided lessons. And I think over time, especially starting in the late 80s and the 90s, these arts programs started to be cut little by little. People who wanted to have these high-level music experiences sometimes had to go outside of their public schools, or sometimes they just didn't do that. They just weren't exposed to high-quality music education, and therefore the pool of people who studied music at a serious level just started to shrink. And the trend became apparent to a lot of conservatories. And so what they started to do was build outreach programs that connected with the communities, to connect with public schools, to provide the arts programs that those schools were not, that ceased to exist in those schools, or partnering with community music schools, or just creating their own music programs. So I think the trend has been happening, and you could even see it places like Juilliard or Colburn in Los Angeles or New England Conservatory. There are thriving community programs that are housed under those conservatories. So when we came to Tianjin, I think what we realized very quickly is a couple of things. First of all, we came into this country, into Tianjin, thinking that we build a beautiful building, we put the Juilliard name on the wall, and there's going to be hordes of people looking to come here and just experience what we have to offer. And the truth is that a very small segment of the population actually knows who we are or knows what we do. And there's a bigger segment, maybe like you, who think that, oh, I definitely know who they are, but that's not for me. That's not for my son. This is a finishing school before people become professional musicians. So part of what we are doing, and we've been working on this for a few years now, is trying to tell the story of this Tianjin Juilliard pyramid, right? And this is something I talked about to all the educators who came that day.
Yeah.
Yes, we do have that elite, top of the pyramid. We have that elite graduate school program where these students are finishing a 2 years master's degree and will go out and win orchestra jobs or become teachers or become professional soloists, whatever they hope to do in their career. That's the point before they launch their career. But down the pyramid, we have a pre-college program for students who are quite exceptional, ages 8 to 18, right? They come to us 1 day per week, and that program is also kind of an elite program if you look at it that way. But then the bottom of the pyramid, which in many ways is the most important part, are the programs where we are giving accessibility to this Tianjin Juilliard, this Juilliard education, to anyone who wants it, to anyone who recognizes that quality music education is special under this name. Enrolling a child in a music class or giving them private lessons on an instrument does not mean that they're on a path to become a professional musician. A music education is just part of an overall education that is necessary for today's child. It teaches things that other subjects cannot teach as easily. The programs we create at the Public Education Department of Tianjin Juilliard are all supporting these same core values. The connecting to oneself, really helping discover who you are as a person. The collaboration with others, and this idea that music connects cultures and countries. And a boy who's playing violin for 2 years, or a girl who is studying cello for 6 years, or someone who wants to just experiment and try a new early years class because my kid is 4 years old and they've never really experienced music. We're inventing all those programs here for anyone. Now, it's a lot because we're only 6 years old and we're kind of creating as we go. We're not the 120-year-old Juilliard. We don't have templates from Juilliard where we know exactly the programs we want to build. So it is a lot of trial and error. It's a lot of talking to the community, to understanding what the market needs are, to even understanding what other options are out there for other people. Like the summer camp you mentioned, sure, we're creating a violin camp, but we don't just want to do what we think is right. We also want to see what all the other violin camps are doing to say like, oh, well, parents will expect this, so we can do a little bit of that, but no one else is offering this, so let's try that as well. And it's been, sure, a lot of work, but it's been one of the most interesting parts of my career because we are creating opportunities for people who really, really want this kind of experience.
Hi, I'm He Wei, CEO and Artistic Director of the Tianjin Juilliard School. Here we are on our beautiful campus, where we present over 150 public performances in our state-of-the-art facilities, in addition to outreach performances in the community and numerous concerts and other venues in China. Our students collaborate with alumni, guest artists, and faculty to bring the most exciting and passionate performances to our audiences. We invite you to join us on this exciting journey of music making and discovery at the Tianjin Juilliard School.
We saw those young performers. Those kids are from all over China, so they study at whatever school they go to, and they have a private teacher at home. Those kids fly in on the weekends. So those kids are hugely dedicated to being a part of this program. And then what you were talking about just now, like, the kids who are living in Tianjin or, 45 minutes away by high-speed train to Beijing, that's another almost, 20 million people or something,
Right.
half the population of Canada in that city. And then Tianjin, what's the population of Tianjin? I don't know.
I think it's like 13 million or something.
Yeah. So we're talking the population of Canada roughly in 2 cities, right? And you have people flying in from other cities in China. So, for example, the summer program, that's a very doable thing for someone like myself, a kid, my son who loves music, loves what he's doing. And it seems like just a great opportunity to practice in a incredible campus. I mean, just actually arriving in the bus as we were arriving, and I saw the building itself, I was like, wow. And then we went inside and holy cow, it's stunning. And it's not just visually pleasing. I mean, you guys have put a lot of time and effort into making those rooms sound amazing. And, every room you walk into, there's a Steinway and all those kinds of things. It was just really that amazing impact. and thinking, wow, this is something that someone like myself could do for their kids.
I think the building is yes, it's an architecturally unique place. I think it's one of the only conservatories I've been to that is so purpose built and so modern. And like you said, each room is carefully designed. Each room has a Steinway piano, and all those things are super important. But I think the Juilliard difference, the Tianjin Juilliard difference, are the educators who are here. And I'm speaking to a music educator, and maybe your listeners are music educators. And this building is just a building when it comes down to it, right? But what I think makes a difference, the biggest difference, are the people who we hire to teach. And so, for example, if your son comes to the violin camp, um, one of the major differences between our violin camp and any other violin camp is that we have our people teaching. We're not outsourcing this. Even a summer camp, which is only 1 week over the summer, we still have our pre-college and our graduate school faculty and our public education faculty. They're all involved. And to us, that's a very important part of this because, as I said before, we're not a commercial venture. We're here to offer music education. We are here to make an impact. We're here to motivate students to not just take music lessons, but to love music, to fall in love with music, to cultivate that lifelong love of music so that when your son decides whether he's going to be a violinist or a teacher or a lawyer or a CEO, music will always stay with him and will always be something he can have in his heart. And I think that only happens when you have music taught in the right way, in the right environment, with the right kind of teacher. Otherwise, as you know very well, students, and I was one of those parents too, who really tried to push music onto my kids because my wife and I are both musicians, and it didn't quite stick. And why didn't it stick? Maybe because parents are a little bit too forceful, or because maybe parents are not making it fun, or maybe the teacher is not making it fun. How can we create music that programs that are engaging and fun and educational, and again, just making kids really understand that music is has to be an essential part of their lives, right? So I think if we say anything of what's unique to Tianjin Juilliard, yes, it's this building, but it's the people who teach as well.
One of the things as we were doing those workshops, they were fun, very practical, useful techniques for working with students, but it was so much fun. So I studied at the Royal Conservatory of Music in Toronto, and still to this day, both of my kids are studying with the Royal Conservatory. I love it. But what I love about the Royal Conservatory, their structure is very clear, well laid out, hugely professional, and what you just said. I remember going into my exams when I was a kid and being so scared. But that honestly, I remember that sort of as an anecdote. I don't remember that as being the Royal Conservatory experience. What I remember is Mrs. Ruth Lamberti, who she loved music and she loved that she could get us to love music. Those are the things that I remember. So, you know, there are always in any music education experience for the teacher, for the learner, there are going to be those moments that are scary, and that's part of the roller coaster of it is that if it was all easy and you could only win, then it wouldn't be exciting, you know? So yeah, I
That's
guess
exactly right. The idea of exams and uh, milestones, or how, especially how parents perceive achievements in music. I think that's something where some schools like ours, we might have a different viewpoint on it than some other schools. I think, especially being in China, many parents expect that music is a competition-based endeavor. And certainly it is competitive. But what we do every year when we invite a new cohort of parents or students into our school, we meet with the parents on that first day. And we talk about the nature of competition. We talk about how we downplay these aspects of negative competition and we focus on positive competition. And what I mean by that is uh, students need to compete. I think competition is motivating. I think competition can make a student work harder. but only if it's framed in the right way. I don't want to look to my right and to my left and say, am I better than that kid? Or did I get the concertmaster spot over that kid? Or, where did we place in this piano competition? To me, that's negative competition, and that doesn't really give you any relevant marker of where you are as an artist or as a young musician. The only competition you have is truly with yourself, right? How am I playing today compared to how I played a month ago or last year? What repertoire have I developed? And the context of that repertoire, how do I understand it differently than I did 2 years ago? These are the kinds of markers that students need to focus on. And this, if we can have parents start to understand that we don't give exams in the same way that they may be used to. We don't do these grade level exams like everyone comes in and says, oh, I do the ABRSM book this, or I do, the China Conservatory model this level. How do I compare? We're like, we don't even know what those mean, to be honest. And when you're here, everyone is on their own path, their own trajectory. And sure, you might be learning this repertoire, and someone else who's the same age as you might be learning that repertoire. But that's because your teacher knows both of you so well, and they are guiding you towards what's right for you in your particular journey. So this has been one of our biggest challenges, I would say, over our first 6 years, is to have not the students as much, but the parents understand that this is the way, like you're opting into our school. You auditioned for us or you registered your child here. So that means you really need to follow our thinking, our philosophy, our methodology of how we teach music. And more than not, way more than not, the majority of parents say to us, you know what? We didn't trust you at first, but now we see this is actually a much healthier approach. We're no longer asking you, like, where does my child rank or what opportunities will my child have? Because what we're seeing is that when this kid gets home after, let's say for pre-college, after an 8-hour Saturday of classes, of lessons, of ear training classes, ensembles, chorus, whatever they're doing here on a Saturday, my kid will come home at 9 o'clock at night and practice, and they can't get enough. And it's because of the way that you're not necessarily making it fun, but you're making it not fun. You're making it something that they really enjoy and that they could take a lot of pride in. So I think that's it's an important philosophy that we try to adopt here.
It's one of the things that it was subtle, but it spoke volumes. As we walked around the school, I saw students there, some of them very young, and they didn't look stressed. I saw the kids walking around and laughing. The kid who played the cello, I saw her walking through the school and she was laughing with a friend. She had just played in front of I don't even know how many music educators, and she just looked like she'd had a great time. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. Like those kids were enjoying what they were doing. They're working really hard. Make no mistake, they've worked hard. They've practiced really hard and they enjoyed it. So I do think that was all of that was coming across and what I was feeling in the place in general.
Yes. They had a good experience on stage. They looked confident. They played well. You saw them. They looked happy afterwards. When you guys went to some of your workshops, they found a table at the school where there was like a little do-it-yourself project. I think the bags that they were given, you could draw on and you can decorate, right? It was just something for the educators that were there, but they found this table. Even though you saw them as these professional musicians, that the caliber of player on the stage, what really made me happy and content is when I saw them go to this table and they found an arts and crafts project, and they were absolutely being kids. They were joking with each other. They were making silly doodles on their bags. They were, just joking around and not being this serious musician. And it shows me that they are not like a shell of a person who is just some sort of robotic music maker, that they have other interests and they have humor and they have social skills. And to us at the Tianjin Juilliard School, we are looking to create people who are well-rounded. I mean, I know it's a widely used term, but we want artists. We don't want simply
Robot.
technical musicians. Yeah.
Yeah. You said something a little bit earlier about trust from the community. You know, it's a different way of seeing things and thinking, okay, I can imagine being a parent who has honestly has spent a lot of time and a lot of money on their kid getting to that level that they're at and saying, okay, now we're putting them in this place called Juilliard, and they're saying, have fun. Mm. And, exams aren't going to be scary. Whoa, hold on, wait a minute. What are we talking about here? You know? And
That's right. Yeah. And I think, well, you used the word trust, and that is a word that I believe strongly needs to exist between especially the parents and an institution, whether it's an international school or whether it's a school like ours. Uh, because, as you said, this is not just their child. I mean, and that's enough for it to be their child, but it's a child with a very, very special talent, right? Especially when we get to the program, like the level of a pre-college program, where a kid, even at age 8 or 10, has been studying an instrument for 5 or 6 years and has achieved a certain level. It's taken a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of drive for both the student and the parent to get to that level. And so to simply like hand over your child, it's a risk, but I think it's a greater risk. Well, I should say, if we're in the United States and we're looking at the Juilliard pre-college model there, it might be a little bit less of a risk because of the reputation of that school and because that school model exists all over the United States. This idea where you go to a third school, maybe one day a week, maybe 2 days a week, and you spend a certain amount of time there, but that's not your focus, right? Your focus can be academics. Your focus can, you could do sports, you could do all sorts of things. Music is a part of that. So I think there's less of a need to build that trust with parents in a society where, or a culture where, those kinds of schools exist. Here, our model is very, very unique, and that has been one of the challenges, both for our Saturday pre-college program or even our Sunday music development program, which is more of a community music school type of model, or even for our camps, right? But for pre-college, I don't want to call it that we're trying to be competitors to the existing model that exists in China, but for the most part, for the past 50 or 60 years, if students have a talent in music, they go to a very specific type of school, which is one of these attached middle schools to one of the major conservatories. These are intensive schools where Monday through Friday or Monday through Saturday, the majority of what you're doing is music based. Sure, you take other classes, but the emphasis is on your instrument, music, and that's 5 or 6 days a week of intensive music study. And here we come, and we are saying, no, 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 you don't need that. You just need one day a week with our method, with our teachers, with our building, and you could achieve as much or maybe even more on your path to becoming a true artist one day. And that's a really hard thing to sell to people, not just because 1 or 6, but because of 6 years or 60 years, right? This is a proven model. Where do you think some of the greatest Chinese artists have come from? They've come from this model. I think what's going to be easier for us as time goes on is to show that students who came through our program, maybe they started in a camp and then changed over to our weekly music development program, our MDP program, eventually got into the pre-college, maybe went abroad to go to a Juilliard or a Colburn or a Royal Conservatory or one of these amazing schools. Where does the person end up later? how fulfilled are they as an artist later? What are they doing with their music or their art in their career compared to maybe someone who chose a different path where it was less about cultivating the love of this art form or really understanding the context of studying an instrument and knowing the background of the music and besides music, just associating it with an art, visual art. What were those artists doing in Vienna at that same time? And how does that artist actually influence this composer? What happened in world history? I mean, these are the kinds of things we want our students to understand, which is why we push this 1 day per week model so that they can go to an amazing international school and learn all of these other things. And again, have the context for the music, which I believe makes them a better artist overall later on in life.
And loving it and understanding that reading notes on a page is a really cool skill. Like that's a really nice thing to do. But being able to interpret what those notes are trying to make us feel and think and what is the purpose of playing these sounds, you know? Why is it so important? It's sound. It's waves moving through air that hit our ears. How is that important? Giving it that context and giving it that emotion. That's I see as a main part of what I do as an educator. And to hear you saying this, and again, I'm coming from a place of having seen these kids play. You're not talking about, you know, Mary Had a Little Lamb, you know. This was amazing music that these kids played, and they played it like they were feeling it, which is to me ultimately the thing, you know, like that's what makes really high level musicians. And what you're saying is the way you do that is to give them enough time to have a well-rounded life and to give them context for what they're doing, you know?
I do want to emphasize a couple of things because we all look to the string quartet that you heard play or the trio, the piano trio that you heard play at our school. These are amazing, amazing kids. And but you can't forget that they didn't start out this way. Some of them may not have even been targeted or associated or labeled as particularly talented at some point. Maybe they were that quiet kid in your classroom who was too shy to even raise their hand and tell you that they had an interest in violin or cello or piano. And I think the other really impactful, important part of music is that, like you were saying, everyone can do it. Maybe not everyone has the natural talent, but everyone can have the drive to bring from a point A to a point B to a point C. Maybe that point C is now going to be what you heard, those kids at that amazing level. But a point C can be a very respectable level where that child now has a new sense of confidence because they can play the ukulele or they can play the drums or they can play the trumpet the way that makes them happy. And so yes, I work at the Tianjin Juilliard School and I work with some of these amazing faculty and students. But to me, this is not the point. To me, the point is, if we talk about that pyramid again, that lower level, getting as many people involved, and sure, some of them will kind of move up that pyramid to the top, but many of them won't. And it's keeping those kids and those people involved in music at that level, at that passion level. That's more important for us, for you, for me, for all of our colleagues who teach. I think this is what we can't lose sight of. We praise those stars. We praise those people who we might, prodigies or whatever. But that's not actually the goal, I think, of what we do.
Yep. And that to me that completely makes sense. I'm curious. I would love for people who are watching this to comment, to let us know what they're thinking as we're talking. Are they thinking, yeah, you guys are right on. You're saying, that's what I believe. Are they thinking, yeah, no. Like I would love to know what people are thinking as they're listening to this conversation, because I feel like you and I are on the same page. It's not about just playing the notes. You're trying to play emotions. You're trying to show people, to show what you're feeling and what you're thinking. And then that in itself, that's it, and then if people also appreciate and connect with what you're saying through your music or through your art, then that's like Megan Highfill, I was at an AMI festival this past week, and she said, that's the cake. We've had the experience. That's the cake, the whole cake. And then
Mm.
the concert and people enjoying it, that's like the icing on top of the cake, you know? And if we can help our students to understand that, then if they decide at some point, okay, I'm not going to make this a profession, I'm going to become an architect, you know, or I'm going to, I don't know, whatever, work in a shoe store. But they love to go home and play guitar, or they love to go home and, you know, just experience music, even if it is listening to music and just having a little more understanding of what is actually happening there. All of those things are wins because we're making people happy in their lives. And then whatever they do with that is, what fits for their situation, for their life.
That's right. An interesting statistic that I used to follow from my days in Juilliard in New York was that of the pre-college graduates that have studied instruments at this very high level through high school, uh, about 50%, 50% of the graduates do not go into music for their undergraduate studies. They're choosing everything under the sun, from science-based to literature to pre-med or architecture, whatever they're studying, uh, and 50% do go into music right away. But I just think the idea that uh, music helped them get to that point, right? Whether it's because they studied music at a serious high level, they developed the focus, the studying focus. They developed the resiliency, like when you are trying to play that phrase perfectly again and again, and you're just not getting it, but you keep trying, and then you finally do get it, and you know what it feels like to win. That gets inside of them too, and so many other factors that help them achieve whatever they want to do in life. This is a point that I also try to emphasize with parents, with students, with college guidance counselors, college admissions officers to whom I write recommendation letters. This child is a very high level trombone student, but I recommend them for Harvard, or I recommend them for NYU, I recommend them for whatever university, because I know that this person can succeed in whatever situation you're putting them in. And I think that, we talk about parent education. This is something that I really try to emphasize, not only to parents, and certainly not to people like you who know this, but to people who employ you, the school administrators, the heads of school, who need to decide, where do I put my funds? Where do I put my school resources? Let's build more sports teams, right? Let's build more VR, AR, XR technology. Let's buy more 3D printers. Sure, that stuff is fun and it's important, and they have their own value. But if you don't invest in the arts, whether you're a parent sending your child to music lessons, or whether you're a school administrator deciding to either cut a school band or hire another music teacher to start a new program, these are things that I think need to be repeated again and again. How important the arts, performing arts especially, I feel, can contribute to advancement in all these other subjects, in a student's self-confidence, in a student's ability to create and express themselves. I just think that arts advocacy is something that I and you and many people like us need to continue to do to their communities. And in that case, then I think we have a chance. I think we have a chance at a world that is more empathetic, that is more understanding, that is more creative, and hopefully just a world that can sustain for future generations.